what I'm calling, solar activity and people's evolutionary adaptive abilities, meaning evolutionary adaptive abilities such as psychic awareness, connection, intuitive capacities that are here to help and aid in our evolutionary growth. When the solar activity seems to hit, like when we get what's called a geomagnetic storm, when that actually impacts the Earth and impacts this thing called the KP index, you see that more of a manifestation in the physical at that point. My father, who had passed away 7 years ago, was I was really close to my dad. Like, we had a great, funny relationship, and he always made a joke. He said, "I'm going to come back and haunt all of you, afterwards." He was just funny. So it was interesting because I literally woke up in the morning and I'm so sensitive to the solar activities. So I could feel like the geomagnetic storm it was hitting. And I hear him, and he, like, as I'm waking up, I hear him say, "How come nobody calls me?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean? Don't you guys realize that when these types of things happen, meaning the solar activity, that the things are more clear for me to communicate and for you to communicate. So why don't you just pick up the phone and call? You could reach out and contact." And so, I mean, obviously we need more evidence at that point, but I think what we're learning is that these solar activities are legit energy that is, impacting us. But like you said, conversely, we can put things out as well.
Right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks. Welcome everyone to Higher Journeys. I hope y'all are doing well wherever you may be on this little blue planet. I am your host, Alexis Brooks, and I am so excited for a lot of reasons. Excited to be back from Contact in the desert, had a wonderful time there. I'm excited to be back to be able to reflect on all that happened there. But I'm excited to be back with brand new shows and a brand new member of the Higher Journeys audience. I want to welcome their sponsor, Psychic Source. Psychic Source, shout out to you. Psychic Source is going to be part of the family. I hope that for a long time, but we're going to be doing some shows around the vocation and the application of psychic ability and all that it represents. It's an interesting thing. It's a very old practice, that of psychic ability, whether you're getting read or you're doing the reading yourself. But I wanted to start off our episode today, this sponsored episode, talking about how psychic ability or getting a psychic reading can be applied to those of you out there who have had contact encounters, extraordinary encounters, and that's a wide spectrum. So again, I want to shout out to Psychic Source. We're going to get into a little bit later what they got planned, what they got in store for y'all. It's very good. It's exclusive for me. Really, really excited. But without further ado, we have someone to talk to about all this. I'm going to put Ms. Susan Manewich on the screen right now. Here she is. She's going to have this conversation with me. We're going to get real deep. Susan, welcome back to the show, my dear. Always great to have you.
Thank you. I very much appreciate being here today.
This is your third or fourth time here, I believe.
I may be fourth.
Maybe fourth. It's always great to have your wisdom as we continue, Susan, to delve into these very elusive areas of experience that are so integral to who we are. And the reason why I wanted to jumpstart our relationship, our partnership with the wonderful Psychic Source, and by the way, I love working with them, is because you and I, as well as other guests that we've had on the show, talk about this ubiquitous phenomenon, I'm going to call it, that we call contact very loosely. We're now using the term experiencer very broadly. The inference is that this is about individuals who are having contact with what we broadly call non-human intelligence. But Susan, that non-human intelligence could include the angelic realm. It could include the ghostly realm, I suppose, but it includes and is not limited to what we call the extraterrestrial, extradimensional, interdimensional realm. People, I'm talking to so many people. I know some of you are out there that are having these wildly anomalous experiences and don't know how to unpack them, where to begin. And I thought that we would start off our series with Psychic Source talking about this idea of getting a reading, a psychic reading, versus or in advance of a regression. And I know that you and I can have a conversation about this. Let's start with that. Is it a possibility? You know a lot about regression. I want to talk about the merits of both, but how they can work together. Let's get into the conversation. How do you feel about just the basic question of reading versus regression?
Yeah. Well, I think that they both have benefits, and I think that's the bottom line. It really depends upon where someone is on their journey and the nature of the circumstance. Sometimes somebody, let's say, maybe seeking out, they feel compelled to seek out, let's say, a channeler or a psychic for them, because they have maybe a feeling or an inkling, and they feel like, well, maybe someone can read me a bit and share what potentially is there. And then, for other people, they may go right into doing something like quantum healing hypnosis to try to uncover and see what may be there. So I think it depends upon really the nature of the circumstance that the person finds themselves in. And what I've seen, been my experience doing the quantum healing hypnosis is, people are ready to go into something very deep at that point.
Mhm.
It's not just a cursory exploratory type of thing. There's usually something deep that's really compelling them, to. It's not just to seek further. What I've found through most of the hypnosis that I did is that there was some, maybe some wound, or there was some, trauma that they felt that was in there as well. And honestly, as a byproduct, the contact piece would come out, not necessarily related to what caused the trauma. Typically, never actually. It was something different than that. So, that's been my experience. And again, sometimes it's a by chance,
Mhm.
that they're meeting another individual, and someone will say, geez, maybe I feel like you're from this star, you're from the star system. I feel like, you and I have some type of an experience, elsewhere together. So, I've seen that, be more like what I would call by chance, like the nature of the synchronicity,
Mhm.
whatever the person may have that's going on. And, it also seems, from looking at like a psychic perspective, that it's more of a maybe a gentle entry point
Mhm.
for people. And of course, they have to determine whether or not, whatever they're being communicated to from this individual is true for them or not. And I just got a message from a friend the other day that said, I went to a psychic and I was told that, I don't want to, share exactly what they said, but it had to do with their ET connections and their extra dimensional connections. And I thought, well, okay, that's very interesting. And this person, by the way, is, well trained in, I would say, like Hinduism and yogic experiences and things like that, like goes and
Mhm.
spends time in ashrams in India, and is a very grounded person as well. So, it also, the long answer, but it also seems that, information does appear to be coming in from different people and places, as it relates to us discovering more about our star connections and perhaps our star origins as
Mhm.
well.
Okay, that's interesting. I I'm reminded of an interview I did, oh gosh, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years ago now with Michael J.S. Carter, who I know you know,
Mhm.
where he was very, courageous, excuse me, in coming forward about his encounters and all of the tumult that he suffered trying to uncover what was happening to him. And he sought out the regression route, and he goes into the detail. He actually worked with Bud Hopkins, for quite a
Oh,
few years. Yeah, yeah, who I know you knew.
mhm.
And, but I asked him, I said, "Michael, look, regression" forgive me, guys, voice is a little hoarse from doing so much talking recently. Regression is a pathway that it seems to be sort of the de facto, approach for people that have had encounters that wanna know more, but is it for everyone? He said, "Well, look, I recommend it. However, for those of you that are thinking of getting a regression, remember, it's like opening up Pandora's box. Once you open that that lid, you cannot close it. And that's not for everyone, Susan. I
Right.
personally talked to, coming back from Contact in the Desert, as a matter of fact, tons of experiences, of course. And
Yeah.
I had this conversation with them, and they're like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. I want to know more, but I do and I don't. And
Yeah.
they agree that the reading may be a little bit more gentle and compassionate, and they're aware and in control. Speak to that, being in control versus being under in hypnosis.
Yes. Oh, that's excellent example of that because that's so important. Like I said, I mean, when I would, because I still do them on occasion just for friends and family, the hypnosis sessions, and so sorry about that. And it was something where, the training of this is you bring people back, and I also want to talk about the practitioners because the practitioners are incredibly important. That a good practitioner that does quantum healing hypnosis is not going to overlay something in there. They're literally just taking the person on a journey for relaxation and to see what's there to be discovered. And to not put words in or to not create an inference. I mean, you have to really be super clear as a practitioner because you have this person in really a compromised state, and
Mhm.
they're laying on the couch or the bed, and they're put into this relaxed state. So any little thing that can be said from the practitioner to the person could taint or potentially twist what they're seeing there. So that's critically important because I have allowed myself to experience this hypnosis from other people, as I was going along my journey of being a practitioner for it. And I found like, ooh, I wouldn't have asked that question, or I wouldn't have said that because that's again creating an inference. So I think that piece is really important. And what you were sharing is there is stuff that comes through. Whatever is coming through, and it does seem like there's the layers, what I call like the layers of the human experience of the life lived, and typically whatever was jarring or traumatic will come through. And then you do get some beauty in terms of what is the greater understanding of what this thing was about, whatever that traumatic event was. But you would also see it go into childhood,
Mhm.
and certain things that came up, whether it could be abuse, it could be something that died, or someone that died, like maybe an animal or a person that they didn't really remember, they didn't really process. So there's a lot of emotional tumult that comes up. I have never had one person that didn't have that emotional tumult, which again is not a bad thing. However, if the goal is to try to understand a little bit more about, star origins or a star connection, or there's an inkling that something like that is there, there's usually a lot that has to go through in order to get to that point. And
Uh-huh.
you
I
don't
agree.
yeah, and you don't want to lead your client to that space. They have to actually come to that space kind of on their own through what I call sometimes the lives between lives,
Mhm.
or this more neutral type of space. So that's important because it does take a while for people. It's not a quick integration. It's not a just a cognitive aha, or oh, that's interesting, or this feels it's resonant. I mean, it's a big unearthing to do these sessions, and that they typically last anywhere from 2 to 4 hours.
Now,
um
I'm gonna interrupt you. So you're talking about the hypnosis as
yes,
opposed to the reading. Okay, because I
yes,
wanna, yeah, that's good
yeah,
that you're bringing that up because I wanna kind of juxtapose those
yeah,
2, and there's a lot more if I
yeah,
can just interject. So there's a lot more, is risk the right word, Susan? I don't know. There's a lot more, you're vested in the emotional aspect of this a lot more, ready or not. Ready or not is what it sounds like. You may go in with one intention and come out with what you're meant to experience or to hear.
sure.
Yeah,
It's a
okay.
it's a
That
it's a much more full, I would say, robust, deeper in unearthing and potential integration.
mhm,
So so again, that's That's if somebody really wants to go there. And it is questionable if something with the ET piece or the interdimensional piece will come up. What I've found is that typically people need multiple sessions in order to really get to that. Get to that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Sometimes, not all the times. It depends what's going on. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes it's a surprise. Sometimes it will come up and it's a surprise for them. But where the point that you're bringing up is, if someone is not ready for that, or if they don't even feel called for it, they may not
Mm.
feel called to do that. So to have a reading is definitely, it's much more user friendly, I would
I think
say.
that's a good word. Gentle,
Yeah.
less intrusive.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. Look, I think it's not a one size fits all, and nor are the experiences that people are having. But I'll give you an example if I may. So there's a great article that I posted on over on higherjourneys.com having to do with this, really just trying to test some of the this in action. I had three members of my audience go get readings with Psychic Source that are experiencers, Susan, and I wanted to get a sense from them as to what these readings were like. Now, I will tell you, hands down, they were all two were like, wow. One was like, he's very intellectual. He's like, yes, this is good stuff. But in
Mhm.
each case, something else came through, connected, but not exactly the same thing. They went in with the express purpose of finding out what's going on with me. Excuse me, and I can get into that maybe a little bit more later. But in the case of one gentleman, I'm going to mention Timothy. His father had just passed away, and it's kind of interesting that we met up and he decided to do this reading at my request because I didn't know his father had passed away. And I got this sense that even though I'm asking him to do this reading to produce this article, I have a feeling it's because his father's trying to connect with him. Once I learned that had just happened, like literally 2 weeks ago, I think his father passed. God bless.
Yeah.
He went and he had the reading, and the psychic was able to address some of his anomalous encounters, but she was also able to tap into the fact that he had a loss and somehow connected something that it seemed that the father was coming through to his experiences. So there's a cross collateralization, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's the right
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
There's a crossing of
Sure.
what you're going to get, what you intended to go get, and what may come out of it, but they're all connected somehow.
Absolutely.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Oh, yeah. Well, of course. I mean, I think absolutely. And that's, we've talked about this previously, like with solar storms, like there does seem to be a enhancement of psychic capacity um, when solar storms are occurring,
Mm,
solar flares and storms. So, if it's almost like this, there are some people that can genuinely tap into these fields, right? Like the
mm.
subtle realms, they can genuinely tap into them. And there's sometimes that those subtle realms are just more enhanced than others. And maybe it has to do with what's going on within that person. Maybe it has to do with the earth, the electromagnetics, and the geomagnetic activity as well. So I think we're discovering that there's all these factors that are
Mm.
going on that help to enhance what may be there and what may be able to be picked up on. And my sense is too, as you know, I've done research and study things and read a bit about consciousness and things like that. And psychic capacity does seem to be enhancing.
Oh, no question. No question.
So yeah, it
Yeah.
does seem to be enhancing. And that's an important thing to pay attention to. I always think about the quote that Edgar Mitchell would always say, Apollo 14 astronaut. He'd say, "Intuition is not our sixth sense; it's our first sense."
Mhm.
So when we say the word psychic, I think sometimes we're talking about intuition as well. I kind of personally like the word intuition because
I do
you know,
too. It's a little
yeah,
more, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
and
There's Yeah,
yeah,
there are a lot of names that are interchangeable. This reminds me of the work, Susan, that Lynn McTaggart has done in the past with the intention experiment. I'm sure you're
yes,
familiar. And she's done many, many different iterations of the experiment of intending. And she as well put emphasis on, just in the course of experimenting, noting the geomagnetic or solar activity at
mm,
certain times
mm,
will accelerate
Mhm.
psychic proclivity. Thinking
Sure.
about a psychic when you're using intuition, we'll call it, or
Mhm.
psychic ability,
Yeah.
you are in a receiving channel.
Mhm. Mhm.
When you are intending, you are in a sending channel. I want to see if I can get this right because she made this very clear that certain solar fluctuations or activity can either inhibit or accelerate one channel or the other. They're not the same. The sending is different than the receiving. When you're in a psychic framework, you're receiving. When you're in an attending or
Yeah.
manifesting, you're
Yeah.
sending. Talk
Yes.
about that. I think that's fascinating.
Well, I'm not. I've generally read what she has written, but I think you may know this. Like, I'm doing ongoing research right now in regards to what I'm calling, solar activity and people's evolutionary adaptive abilities, meaning evolutionary adaptive abilities such as psychic awareness, connection, intuitive capacities that are here to help and aid in our evolutionary growth. And
Mhm,
there does seem to be a connection. For example, and this is one personal that I'm going to share because of what you said. It just prompted me to verbalize this and share this with you and your audience. So when we had these solar storms come in, because when the sun pops, let's say a flare or a CME, it's expressing an energy out. And typically, from what I've seen, and the people around that I am that are taking part in, let's say, this research project, I don't like to call it that, but that's basically what it is. People feel this greater sense of expansion. They feel this greater sense of creativity, almost like a euphoria, and sometimes a calmness, but not like a calm sedated. It's more like a calm euphoria that goes along with this, and they do feel as if their capacities are more enhanced at that point.
mhm,
um, when the solar activity seems to hit, like when we get what's called a geomagnetic storm, when that
mm,
actually impacts the Earth and impacts this thing called the KP index, you see that more of a manifestation in the physical at that point. And so, where I'm going to share this personal story, my father, who had passed away 7 years ago, I was really close to my dad. Like, we had a great, funny relationship, and he always made a joke. He said, "I'm going to come back and haunt all of you, afterwards." He was just funny. So, like, he. It was interesting because I literally woke up in the morning, and I'm so sensitive to the solar activities, so I could feel like the geomagnetic storm it was hitting, and I hear him, and like, as I'm waking up, I hear him say, "How come nobody calls me?" And I said, well, what do you mean? I'm kind of like having this this mental conversation in my head with him. And he said, don't you guys realize that when these types of things happen, meaning the solar activity, that the things are more clear for me to communicate and for you to communicate. So why don't you just pick up the phone and call? You could reach out and contact. And so, I mean, obviously we need more evidence at that point, but I think what we're learning is that these solar activities are legit energy that is impacting us, but like you said, conversely, we can put things out as well. So an
absolutely.
amplification on not just the manifestation, but an amplification on that communication. And like I keep saying, it does seem that when the geomagnetic activity actually hits the earth, because sometimes it takes a couple of days from the sun to the earth in order to hit, that there is an expression of it in density at that point, an expression of it in the matter world. So I'd have to look more specifically at what Lynn wrote on that, but I'm seeing similar with this research that's being done right now.
Oh, I love it. You're just bringing
Yeah.
up so many points. There are a few things I wanna bring up in terms of your father saying, "Why don't you just pick up the phone and call?"
Yeah.
There's a book, I don't know if you're familiar with it, I would completely recommend called Hello from Heaven. It's a book that's been around for probably over 20 years, and I know over 20 years because I actually reviewed that book, by Bill and, Judy Guggenheim. Hello from Heaven, where they basically, Susan, polled I don't know how many thousands of respondents about their what they coined the term ADC, or after death communication, and the forms that these ADCs come in. And one of them, although it's not the most common, is what is called a telephone ADC. And I absolutely. Well, these are people that have had
Yeah.
encounters with their deceased loved ones, hearing them on the phone. And if I can, may I share a story with y'all?
Yeah.
A little story about a woman that I met, who I actually wrote about in my book, Conscious Musings. I met her on vacation in Aruba many years ago. I had read and had reviewed Hello from Heaven, I believe, at the time. So I knew about the telephone ADC, but she proceeds to tell me while we're waiting in the pool in Aruba with my husband, she's like, and somehow I ended up telling her that I'm a researcher in this field. And she starts telling me this story. And she said, we'll call her Lisa. She said that her father had recently passed, and she was one day talking on the phone with her sister. And at once, in an instant, the phone went dead. She heard almost like a white noise static on the phone. Her
Mm.
sister went away, and the father's voice came through and said, "Lisa, is that you, honey? I'm here. I'm right here." This is God's honest truth.
Yeah.
And she looked at me, but she said, "I know this happened, but I don't want to believe it." That's a whole other thing, the cognitive dissonance involved. But I'm digressing a little bit, but the point is, and the
Mm.
question is, could it be that certain geophysical conditions would make the likelihood of that happening even more greater? Could your father have been right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that wasn't the first time that it just took me a while to realize that that was connected to the solar and geomagnetic activity, because he had said that before. So he's been communicating in the sense of, you know, like, okay, I may not be here the physical yet, I still would very much appreciate and like for my family to contact me. And
Mhm.
so I have this communication with him, but he was referring to other people in the family to acknowledge him and to literally say, just use the phone to call in even if you don't hear me. I know your story, but he's like, even if you don't hear me on the other line, that's all you have to do. So if
Wow.
it's not like you have to do it this way, but if it makes it easier for you, like this is how we can do it. And
Hmm.
I will also say this, the week that he passed away, we had so much activity in the house that he passed away in. It was interesting because the what was going on in the house, like the blender went on by itself, a clock that didn't have a battery in it just started dinging.
Oh.
His tackle box, he had a fishing box that just closed. I mean, this was all
Oh,
in the
wow. That's a
I
lot
mean,
of activity.
it is. And I ended up having a little like electromagnetism reader in my house, and I actually went to the points of the house, and just said, I'm just curious, what is the electromagnetic activity in certain spots where this was happening, and it was really high, like astronomically
Was this
high.
like a Geiger meter? Kind of like a Geiger meter?
Yeah, similar to that.
Uh-huh.
It's similar to that. So it was just
Wow.
a lot of activity in certain parts of the house, and I thought, that's again all these little things that you pick up along the way. So we're living in this sea right now, which I'll probably talk a little bit about the solar activity because it relates to this impulse that people are having, to explore more about their evolving consciousness right now,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
it's not just people, it's not just for the people that were like the spiritual enthusiasts. You have police officers, you have lawyers, you have doctors, you have lay people doing whatever, that are now saying, there's something more to me than my day-to-day job and this life, and I have an inkling about that. And I do think that the solar energies are really pushing that through. I've spoken about this before, like the magnetic field around the planet is definitely waning, and it has been, and
Mhm.
that may be creating more of this charge, so to speak. I mean, we're seeing greater lightning charges, like
Mhm.
electrical charges. That's something. I mean, look at the auroras that we just
Oh,
had.
yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
right? So, like, that hasn't happened in a very, very long time, about 100 years. I wrote an article on that. And so what is that? That's energy, folks. Like it's a lot of energy that's coming in.
And it
And
can be harnessed. It can be harnessed, absolutely.
yeah, it can be
Yeah.
harnessed for I'd say in a non-governmental,
Right,
non-defense
well,
way.
don't get
um,
any ideas what they happen. I'm being totally
oh yeah,
facetious, yeah. Well,
no.
I
So it can
wanna
be harnessed, exactly, and
oh, yeah.
that's what's going on right now for sure.
So a couple of things I'm wondering, Susan, and I'm sure, my mind is kind of on the spiritual, those with the spiritual proclivity, those that do it professionally and those that don't. If they're aware of that, if they indeed find their own abilities becoming more intense during these times, and if they're actually monitoring that. And I'm also curious
Mm,
to get your thoughts on. So let's say somebody wants to opt for exploring their experiences, whatever they may be, by doing a reading, as an example. Would it possibly be wise to wait and see, when the solar activity is stronger? So even if you're sitting for a reading, could it
yeah.
be more potent during that time? We are living at a time when answers to life's biggest questions are crucial, making clarity and understanding essential for a better tomorrow. Many seek support and guidance to bring awareness to their otherworldly encounters, in addition to life's day-to-day challenges. What do these experiences tell us about the nature of reality and of the self? To unlock a deeper understanding of your journey and discover answers to your most pressing questions, connect with one of the many compassionate psychic advisors at Psychic Source. As the oldest and most reliable psychic network, Psychic Source offers a variety of advisors with diverse spiritual gifts, tools, and reading styles. You'll find energy healers, intuitives, empaths, mediums, channelers, and even pet psychics. Whether it's a tarot or astrology reading, or you want to develop your own psychic gifts, Psychic Source is here to help. Right now, for the Higher Journeys audience, new customers get a 30-minute reading plus 5 extra minutes for just $20. Celebrate Psychic Source's 35th anniversary with 35 minutes for only $20. Just click the link provided or go to psychicsource.com and be sure to use the promo code Alexis for this special introductory offer. Psychic Source offers 24/7 service via phone, video, or chat. You decide. The time is now to discover your answers. Let Psychic Source help you trust your tomorrow.
I would absolutely say yes. I used to teach emotional intelligence for years, for like 15, 18 years, and did research on it. And what what we teach in emotional intelligence is, it's like emotional awareness, right? And emotion management. Those are the two things. So an awareness of the mood is critical. It also in conjunction, well, what's the task at hand and how do you manage that? So, I would say that's a great time to do it. It's a fabulous time to do it.
Mhm.
If because there is a lot of this charge that's coming in. If sometimes it's so intense, it may
Mm.
be hard for people to settle their mind a bit. To be clear, I think that piece is important. So, on behalf of those people who are doing readings, they're going to have to really monitor themselves to make sure that some of their own stuff is maybe not coming up during that time.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm. Fair enough.
and, I think that piece is really important. Because it's not a criticism, because not everyone right now is okay, feeling okay when when the solar activity happens or when there's that high KP. So it's important for them to have really emotional awareness of what's going on within themselves. I think that's really key. But I'd say it's a great time to do it because that opening really does seem to be there.
That's beautiful. I'm glad that you've decided to fold in the solar influence to our conversation, Susan, because I think it's not talked about enough, and I don't think there's some in perhaps in our community that have made that correlation that there's something grand happening, grand and tumultuous at the same time,
Right.
with our cosmos right now and how it's affecting us. No less than how the lunar cycles affect us. It's just
Yes.
times I don't know how much, but
Yes.
I wanna play something. I wanna play a clip of you, as a matter of fact, because we're talking about emotional intelligence. We're talking about how do you out there in the audience that are having these experiences, trying to understand them, trying to reconcile these two very vastly different worlds, so to speak. Susan, you gave me a great little clip a couple of years ago for a workshop that I did that I think the audience would benefit from hearing from as you have navigated your own journey with these extraordinary experiences. So let's listen to this and we'll be right back.
Well, I would say how I have best handled walking in these worlds of contact, whether it's being showing up at the end of my bed, and I'm participating in this journey and going out to the cosmos and seeing something really grand and amazing. And yes, that's wonderful. But at the same time, it can be overwhelming. And, early on in life, when I would have these encounters, I still have them. They're just at a different beat now in terms of how I integrate and how I work with it. Is as I got a little bit older, one of the things that I realized is there's an isness. And once I stopped making something so grand or so small and just realize being in that middle space of this isness, that it is an experience and experiences can come and go. And literally approaching it like you would any other experience that you have, even in the physical realm on a day-to-day basis, if you can actually hold it in that space, what I've found is that provided the greatest level of integration and acceptance that there is this divinity, there is this higher order. We may not always understand it and know it. And it's been a great stress reducer for me, not to feel like I have to know everything all the time, that the answers will come with that patience and with that allowance. And also the big thing is trust, just trusting that you will know when you're supposed to know. And I have found those answers come when I've least expected it, whether it's vacuuming or being outside in my garden, or even waking up from a dream. So those are the pieces that I found to be really fantastic. And one more piece to that is emotional intelligence has helped tremendously, because if you can identify what you're feeling and manage that in real time with the contact or with other extraordinary experiences along with your day-to-day life, you move through things faster and you don't get caught and you don't get held up. So that's what I found has been the greatest assistance and help.
That was great. That was great advice that a lot of people have now heard in the workshops that I've given. You brought up some really key things. Integration is what we're talking about. How, again, I use this term schism. You're having these experiences and then expected to get up the next day and be, I'm going to say it, a normie
Mm,
and interact with the normies, forgive me,
mm,
and be okay with it. And a lot of people, Susan, just are not. And so what you had to share, where you did mention emotional intelligence being a big factor, is so important. And trust. I'm going
mhm,
to use this to segue. Trust is such a, it's, we use it, we kind of bantied about the term trust. Well, what is that? It's just, it's a knowing, um, whatever it is, that everything's going to be okay. But it's just it's a knowing that the answers will come when they're supposed to, and not a second, not a millisecond before.
mm,
Uh, I'm going to mention Psychic Source again. I love their new tagline: "Trust your tomorrow." Trust your tomorrow and trust your today. Trust your now as well. So anyway, I want to take off on that. Again, I'm speaking to the people that are having a challenge with these experiences. I want to bring up another woman that is in the article that's over on Higher Journeys, who's had lifelong encounters starting as a child with the Hat Man, shadow people.
mm.
And she went to have a reading with Psychic Source, and they were able to kind of dig into that a little bit. So many people, and she knew nothing about the phenomenon, that it is a phenomenon, what we
Yeah.
call Hat Man. How do
Mm.
we begin to parse all of this? And there is help, but go ahead, take it where you want to take it.
Yeah, I mean, there's I think as this veil is becoming, I don't even think it's thin anymore. I think it's like being lifted off.
Fun,
Um,
just about.
right? I think, the unseen realms were just beginning to really have conversation with. So maybe what people would call an extraterrestrial is not. Maybe it's an interdimensional being.
Mhm.
Okay. What somebody would call a ghost, maybe is an angelic being, right? So as we start to really define what are these qualities of these things that we're seeing and we're feeling, and how is that impacting us? Do we feel like it's good? Do we feel like it's bad? Do we feel like it's a shadowy being that is, malevolent, or is this something that's benevolent? And then when we've got that quality on it, how is this impacting our growth and development? Because sometimes those shadowy beings are there for us to become stronger, and maybe they're there for us to look at our own negativities that we have, and maybe there's something that's there. So I think as this world that we're in is going through this big shift and this change, as the solar system, the earth is in the solar system, you've got the sun, you've got the central sun, you've got the cosmic rays, you've got so much that's dynamic. And this is what we wrote about in the free book, the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, that the time would come on the planet that that all this is kind of like in our face at this point. You've got this great physical turmoil, and then you've got this new energy, so to speak, that's coming in, our eyes. So it's more commonplace, I would say, than not at this point. And because of that, we're having better conversations about things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and becoming more defined. Like, I just wrote an email to a group I'm on the board of today. I said, we need to define what does UFO and extraterrestrial mean? Are what does this mean? What are the values that we hold? Does that mean anything goes?
Mhm.
Or does that mean, hope not, does that mean that we're beginning to now define certain things as we grow and mature? And bringing it back to the psychic piece, the intuitive piece, that capacity to again, this was in the research as well, and I think this is part of the evolutionary adaptive abilities, the capacity to pick things up non-verbally is really critical, because even with the solar activity, there's energy that's just moving so much faster than words can do justice for at this point.
I couldn't agree more.
And when I look at my own encounters that I've had with beings, in the physical, in the share, I call it a shared space. There was no talking. It was it was a read. It was a reading. It was a reading, and I remember thinking, "What are they looking at? What is it that they're looking at with me?" But they were really reading, and they were reading something deep inside of me that I didn't even know about my own self.
Mm.
And so I think that this is part of where we are going in general.
Mhm.
Um, and obviously, it's up to each person to make a determination for themselves what feels resonant and what doesn't.
That's right. Absolutely. And again, like I said, we cannot paint this with a broad brush. There's no one size fits all. But as I'm listening to all of these stories, and I'm following you 100% in terms of the rules of engagement are just different now. And I think we can judge by our own sense of urgency to learn more of these things, whether we're being prodded by a podcast that you watched on this subject, or you're just feeling an internal pull to understand broadly the nature of reality more, but how you interact with it. It's something really powerful is happening. I want to talk about another audience member who's in our blog post. Y'all go over to higherjourneys.com. I'll have the link below and read this article. It's excellent because these are 3 people that got the reading. Angie, shout out to you. I'm not going to mention her last name, but she said I could bring up this story. Another anomalous experience. There's so many happened to her. She says a couple of weeks ago, her husband's saying a couple of months ago. The whole idea of time is off the table because she can't even remember. But she essentially was in her bedroom, Susan, wide awake. Her husband had gotten up to, I guess, maybe brush his teeth. And all of a sudden, she's looking at, I suppose, the wall, but somewhere between the wall and the bed, she said she saw a portal open up.
Mm, mm,
She described it as a portal.
mm.
Now, as what classically will happen, not all the time, but many times in these sorts of encounters, is a paralysis that she had. She could only move her eyes, and she was just fixated, obviously, on this space, no space in the middle of the room, opening up to what appeared to be another dimension. And she said that just as she felt something, something was coming through back to normal when her husband walked back into the
Uh,
room.
yeah.
So her reading was based on that. She wanted to get some insight, and I won't go in because it's personal, but she was blown away by the reading. Um, One thing she did say that the psychic told her is that she, without knowing anything, she says, "You're an astral traveler, aren't you?" And she said, "Oh my God, I am."
Mm,
I will say that the psychic felt that it was not just something coming through the portal, but that she had astral traveled out of her body into through that portal and got caught in the middle of the awareness of it,
mm.
if that makes any sense. I thought that was
Oh,
fascinating. It's
yeah.
one of the more fascinating, situations I've heard. Do you have any thoughts on just this whole idea of portals opening up sometimes in people's spaces? Let's
Well, I've
talk
had
about that.
I remember I had that as a kid. Um, I
Okay.
had that happen as a kid, absolutely. And so I'll just describe it in real time because, do I have any ideas on it? I have a personal experience of it, right? And,
Okay.
and then, breaking that down and what was the consciousness going on with me at the time. I remember, I think I may have shared this story. I was outside, I was a little kid, I was playing with mud pies. I was making pyramid mud pies. And I was doing it in my driveway area where the grass meets the road. It was like there was mud and a lot of rain, and it was a great place to go and hang out and do that. And it was one of my favorite things in the world. And I remember I was doing that, and I could feel the beings, like I could feel them. And I remember going, mm-mm, I'm not doing anything with you guys. I'm making mud pies, and that's what's going on right now. So, like, leave me alone. I'm a little kid. I don't want anything to do with you. And I hear, Susan, we know you're not just a little kid. Like, we know you know. And I remember I looked up and I saw this pinhole in the sky, and it was literally beginning to open. And it was call it a portal, you can call it what you want, but that's what I saw. And I never got the impression it was like, oh, it's just a ship. Like, I got the sense like this is opening up to this bigger space. But I would just say that I felt it, and I felt this communion in this connection. And whether we call it a portal or we call it a ship, it was an opening of a shared space. And maybe that's one of the things that I can say at this point, that I don't think, from speaking from my own experience, I don't think we're just these bystanders that, oh, something happens to us. I do
Mhm.
think that there is this, and there's some type of an agreement upon cells, of conscious cells, that has this type of engagement that occurs. So it was as if, like, my body was in a body, my being and consciousness and the energy of my body was also able to do this. So I hope that that makes sense. So
Mhm.
maybe with her in that situation, um it she was she was still partially somewhere else, like you said.
Mhm. Mhm.
It wasn't something that was just happening to her. Oh, this portal opened.
Right. That made
That's
sense to me that she was somehow participating in this experience, and I agree with you. Again, I'm on the same
yeah,
page with your girlfriend. I
yeah,
think in many of these cases, we default to the fact that we're simply witnessing the UFO. Look, I've been on the whole idea prospect that witnessing of a craft in the sky may be more than just witnessing of a craft in the sky. There could be an interaction that's taking place. I digress. But yes, agreed. So
yeah,
what she said could make sense. And Angie said that she's willing to explore that more. And I said to her, I have a feeling that these sorts of things have been happening to you a lot for perhaps a lifetime. So,
yeah. And maybe again, it's that a lack of familiarity. Like, when we go to a new place, whatever it is, it's like this. maybe ambivalence, or, oh, what is this? There could be some excitement, but the more that we're able to do this and remember, right?
Mhm.
Like the more that we're able to remember, maybe the better we get at closing the door when we leave.
Right, right, exactly. That's important too. That's important
Yeah,
too.
and
But
really interesting about her husband coming in and having that happen. Like like it began to stop at that
it
point.
stopped abruptly, she said,
Yeah,
as soon as
yeah,
he walked in, and she was really confused about how long I remember she said that, she was wondering why her husband was taking so long because she felt like it was so long. Again, there's this warping of time when you're in the midst of these experiences. So, I asked her, "How long do you think this lasted?" And she said, "Well, again, it seemed like it was a lot longer because my husband was gone so long, but, I would say maybe 10 minutes, but
yeah.
who's to say? In this space, there is no time, as we know."
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
going back to the free research, the vast majority of these experiences happen with people by themselves.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Oh,
the, this
absolutely.
when you're in this alone space, there's this expanded space, right? Like I know for me when I'm alone, I just feel like my consciousness, I say I'm able to unfurl. And it's almost like you're able to be a part of so many different things because you're not having to focus on one person or the other.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so the fact that
Wow.
alone versus having somebody there, and what's the
Right.
consciousness of her husband as well. Not a criticism, but maybe not so open to some of this stuff.
He is
It's
open, actually,
oh,
quite
okay,
open. Yeah,
okay,
we'll leave it there. I don't wanna go too deep into their
okay.
life, but they're they're great folks. Shout out to you guys, and thank you for participating in this great article. Listen, before we close out, Susan, and by the way, we are going to the Patreon after show. I know y'all were waiting to find out. Of course, we're going over there. We're gonna continue the conversation for a little while, but I wanna touch on, past life, readings. There's the regression side of it as well, but the let's just talk about exploring past lives. I think that's also become a bit more, I wouldn't call it it's part of the public discourse, but people are more interested in using that as a form, in some cases, of therapy to
Oh yeah.
understand the conundrum that they're in today or the lives that they're living today. Give us your thoughts on that, and, because I know that Psychic Source does a lot in that area, and it's coming up a lot.
Yeah.
Why is it so important?
I will kind of go back to the sun for a moment, on
Okay.
this, because I I wrote, one of the first articles I wrote was about, I'll call it electromagnetic neurogenetic, that these deep impulses that are coming from, the cosmos, these cosmic rays, like they're a memory jogger, and
Hmm,
it seems to be stimulating aspects and pieces of us that are deep within us. It's almost as if the whole person, and all the lives lived. And this goes back to, I think I shared this with you with, I worked for 20 years with Dr. Rudy Shield on this. So some of the contact experiences, like what you played in that video, I was taken out to the cosmos, shown, the evolution of this universe, and how it condenses and births a new universe, like this fractal universe. And the sense that I've had for ages is that, all the pieces and parts to us are coming back for us to put them together and to make sense of them. So, um, the past, because that's what seems to be happening on this universal scale, like cosmologically, universally. We talk about, ascension, or we talk about the earth, birthing into, this next phase. Well, in order for that birthing process, it's not just you drop the new, but there's this wholeness that seems to be coming back together. So those pieces and parts of us seem to be activated with this, with some of this. Again, I'll kind of keep going back to the cosmic rays, the solar activity, the time of the planet, the changes that are happening. So how do we really know who we are if we're just focusing on this one life?
agreed.
And it seems like this body this time around is this incredible holding vehicle for, all of these different lives lived, whether they be on this planet or not.
Mhm.
And sometimes people will say, well, are you a firster here, or have you been around a while?
Right. Well,
Right?
it's interesting you say whether on this planet or not, which reminds me of a story. I don't think we'll have time to get into it, but an individual that I spoke with who did in fact go for a past life reading, and I think it may have been a regression, but in the regression, what was determined was that she in a past lives, in air quotes, was another being. So you've got
Yeah.
that coming up, and there was the aftermath for her. It was revelatory and exciting for her, but she shared it with some people that she shouldn't have, and they bullied her to pieces. A whole nother story for another
Oh,
time, but yeah. So
well,
there's an intersection. That's why I wanted to bring it up, Susan, because it seems like there's an
yeah.
intersection between our contact encounters and previous incarnations, and how all of these things are connected.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they are, they are. There's they're not disconnected. They are.
Mm,
I've even started to get to the point where I ask myself, if I have a schism with someone, I'm actually asking myself, is this person, have they been in a body on this earth before? Um,
mm,
or even if I get along really well with someone, have they? Is it just Earth that they've been? Have they had different lifetimes that they've experienced that I may, understand or not? And are they maybe from a star system or a place I'm totally unfamiliar with? Which is why I'm like, I don't get you.
I love
Honestly,
that.
yeah.
Wow. You just hit on something really super heavy, Susan. Wow. In terms of, and I know a lot of people in our audience will relate because of the vast differences in ideology right now, because of all that's gone on, and many of you are scratching your head going, and it could be a relative, it could be a family member. I just don't get you. Well, what you just said would be something to entertain, to try to be more compassionate about why that person is so different than you. They literally could be made of different DNA. Different
Absolutely.
DNA.
Absolutely, and I've even looked at,
Mm,
people in the UFO, ET, I don't wanna say community, but that have an interest in this. I mean,
mm,
there's ideologies that are vastly different than mine. Like, for example, one example would be cloning. Like, that is not part of anything that I know that I carry as part of my understanding about what this is for me. Does that mean that's a truth for everybody? No. So where does that come from? And that's just an extreme example, to share with you. But even just human beings and trying to understand, how with certain people, sometimes you can see it's their first time around here,
mm,
or they
mm.
maybe
Could
haven't
be.
been on Earth in ages, like thousands of years. And so I think that's one of the things that's really helpful. And if you have an intuitive person or a psychic that is skilled in that arena, um, they can pick that up, I would say, fairly easily.
And
And I
shed light on it. That's
Yeah,
huge.
and I think we're starting to recognize each other a little bit, better, and different,
Mm.
with this greater understanding of, here's a spirit that fills this body. Where has the spirit been, right? Where has
Right.
the spirit been, and where does the spirit go when the spirit is sleeping? Is the spirit going to, a different, dimensional reality? Are they
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think again, it's the spirit inside of that body, and where has that spirit been? And I think we're in the process of finding that out with each other.
Wowee. I think that sheds such important light on how one might reconcile the differences, because the differences and the divisions have been so gargantuan lately. They've
Mhm.
been part of our human experience forever, but they've certainly been accelerated. And that is a great way, perhaps, to have a sense of understanding so you can move forward. That's huge, Susan. I appreciate your sharing that
Thank you.
with us. And I'm also appreciative that you brought up the fact that, look, you're getting a psychic reading is not going to be the be all end all. We know that, but I think it's an excellent entry point to start to explore the self and all of these iterations, the in your face and the nuanced. It's so important to do. I want to remind you again. Well, I'm going to be talking about what we got going on with psychic stars. I got a deal for you. I got a deal for you. I do. Check this out, Susan. I'm just going to talk to you and say, here's the deal. And it's exclusive to me. I want y'all to get a reading because I had one, and there's going to be a lot of stuff to talk. And I want to hear from you about your experience. Psychic Source Susan has offered my audience only 35 minutes because they've been around for 35 years. They're the largest network. They're the largest, I believe, in the country. Correct me if I'm wrong. A long time, 35 years. 35 minutes for $20. You know how much readings are. 35 minutes for $20. First time only, one time only. So go do it. Go do it and tell me, report back to me, please, as to what happened if you dare share. There'll be a link, of course. You can go to psychicsource.com, put my name, Alexis, so you get the deal because it's not going to happen otherwise. So very cool. I'm really excited about that and excited to have them a part of the Higher Journeys family for a little bit for the ride, for the big journey. So thank you once again to Psychic Source. Susan, now you got a lot going on. Let's close with this before we go next door to Patreon. I know you've got a lot written on Substack. What's happening and what's coming up with you and your latest musings, I'm going to call them.
Yeah. So I've got a new article that will be coming out shortly. So that one's long overdue, but that actually has to do with the differences of what people are experiencing in their encounters, and just putting a different framework to it. Like I said, I feel like we're finally at that point in conversation now that we can do this from a mature standpoint. So that's pretty exciting. And I do have this, I'm calling it a research project. I am in the process of collaborating with a university that's in Europe on this, and that relates to the solar geomagnetic changes and our evolutionary adaptive abilities, which I think is important. That we look at what's happening with multiple people, and those commonalities. So like I said, to get it out of what seems to be abnormal, but put it into the norm range. I feel like we're there now. It seems like the energy on the planet is actually there now. And then I've got some other things coming up, but if people can just look at my Substack or even my website, I will be able to share that. I can't do that right now.
Tell us your website so we can put it up on the screen.
ietevolve.com, and Substack is ietevolve.substack.com.
IET Evolve. How'd you come up with that? IET. Let's think about that. Evolve.com.
Yeah, that's a play on that words. And I've had that since 2007.
Have you really? Okay.
Oh yeah. And it was also about intelligent emotional truths. So it served both. And I thought, well, that's perfect.
That's not one that I think would be grabbed up. So I'm glad it belongs to you. Next thing you know, someone's going to be doing ietevolve.us or
no. Oh way, don't do that. There's enough room for all of us to be creators. So
yes, there is. Indeed. Exactly. Indeed there is. Well, listen, Susan, speaking of, you're on this solar thing. I'm appreciative of your work in this because there are people that are covering different aspects of it, but you are so, first of all, you're very, affected by it. And the way you're kind of distilling the role that this solar activity is having on our own consciousness has just been, I think, just brilliant. So I'm appreciative of that. Would you be willing to go next door for the after show and go a little bit deeper into that as it relates to the Schumann resonance?
Sure.
I love putting people on the spot. We did not talk about this beforehand because I find it connected and I find it, and look, reading these sorts of things can be kind of cumbersome, but I think people really want to understand, listen, I'll close with this. I'm hearing from so many people that are like, Alexis, what happened yesterday? Things were just wacko with me. And I just don't get it. Why? A few weeks ago, if y'all remember the show that we did with Whitley Strieber and Kim Carlsberg and Captain Ron from Contact in the Desert, Susan, it was crazy, the technical issues that we had and, where we were so tempted to assign it to the subject that we were covering, which is a bit, controversial. Could there have been some interference? But could it have been solar activity? Could it have been some kind of geomagnetic, anomaly? So, question mark. I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
Fun to ponder. Always.
Makes you wonder. Okay, guys, listen. Susan, as always, thank you, my dear. You know how much I love you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to all of you watching. Thank you, Psychic Source, of course. Now let's go next door. We're going to talk about Schumann resonance, a little bit more of the solar craziness. Thanks, everyone. Love you much. Take care.